Welcome back to the first tutorial of the new year. My name is Arnold and you're watching AF Tutorials, your trusted resource for various tutorials on YouTube. The new year just starts like the old one ended with our 3ds Max series. We still have to cover a few more topics in order to get you started in 3ds Max, just like I promised in the title. Today we're going to take a look at the materials for the Arnold renderer. Please keep in mind that we are just covering the basics and we're not going to explore every last button and parameter. When you're fairly new to 3ds Max, I recommend that you watch the material and UV mapping video first. I'm linking the video in the info box in case you have missed it. The video will give you the basics of how to apply materials and how to adjust the position of textures. But today we're going to take a dive into the materials specifically for the Arnold renderer. So let's get started. The scene that we're going to use today is from the Arnold renderer website. It's the studio lighting scene, the one with the little robot, and I'm going to place the link in the description below. While you're pausing the video and get that file from the description, consider subscribing to the channel. It's free of charge and it motivates me to keep the channel running. Please do not hit the like button yet. Watch the video first till the end, and if it was helpful, hit that like button. I'm also going to reveal a little secret video at the end of this one, so make sure you don't miss that. So here's our scene, and let's take a look first. So we have this robot here. Right now we are looking through a perspective window, so there's no camera in the scene. Let's take a look from the top, or in a perspective or an axonometric view. You can see there's a backdrop that provides a floor and a background, and we have three Arnold lights that are basically light planes that are shining onto our robot. What we want to do is today talk about materials, so don't spend too much time on the lighting here, but what we want, or at least what I want, is a camera. I want a physical camera. I could go into the perspective view and render the view, but in the other tutorials I was showing you how to render a scene with a physical camera, so let's do that in this scene as well. So I'm going into a top view. From the dialog I choose the camera, and I'm choosing the Arnold camera, and the physical camera, not the Arnold camera. There's something else, the physical camera, and I'm going to place it right here in front and looking at the robot. Now if I switch into my perspective view, I'm going to move my camera in the perspective view with the middle mouse wheel, move it to the center, so about hip height. And now if I select my physical camera and I go to modify, I can adjust the focal length of the camera so that my robot is filling out the frame. So right now that would mean a 60mm camera or so, 65mm camera. So now we have a physical camera. The default value, the default exposure value for the physical camera right now is an exposure value of 6. Let's take a look at how that works with the light, because as soon as we add a physical camera, here under rendering environment, we have the physical camera exposure control. So the exposure control from the physical camera is taken, and here is also the global default exposure value of 6. So let's check out the render setup. I don't want to spend too much time rendering, so I'm going to check out the common size. I'm rendering a 640 by 480 picture, and when I go into the Arnold renderer, right now you know that the default settings are 3:2, so I'm going to change that to 3:2. That is also usually 2. We can also always increase it later, but the 3:2:2 is the kind of standard quality setting. Yes, and I'm sorry, I'm not adjusting I'm not going to use the active shade. That is my computer is a little too slow for the active shade mode, so I'm going to change that to production render mode. And again, sorry, check 640 by 480 Arnold renderer, and the sampling is 3:2:2. Yes, that's good, but the ray depth here should be 1 by default. Okay, so if I hit render now, it will render, and the lighting is kind of okay in this view. I'm also going to create a no, let's leave it to this camera. That's quite good. We can always zoom in. So in the render view, if I can zoom in, if I want to see the quality of some of the material settings and so on. But it is about materials today. So there is another default or another setting that you have to do before you start, or at least I recommend to do it when you work in Arnold. Here in the render setup, there is system. And here under system, I have already clicked on it. It's the legacy 3ds Max map support. That means not that the materials, the standard material, for example, will work in Arnold. It's still not working, but it means that some of the maps like fall off or like gradient and so on that we are used to from the other render engines, they still work in Arnold here. So click legacy 3ds Max support on. And now we're ready to go into our material editor. But first, I'm going to select the whole robot, select all the objects. Let's give it a new material. I'm opening the material editor. I hit M on my keyboard. And right now, the two materials that I have for the backdrop and for the robot are in here. I don't have to select the robot with the window. Sorry, I can also do it in a different way. In the material editor, my two materials here, the backdrop and the robot. And if I want to work with the robot material, I can select the robot material, and here's a button that's called Select by Material. And that will select every object that has this material. So now I have selected all the objects with this material. And now I'm going to start by giving it a new material. I'm not going to use this one. I'm going to start with a new material. And the standard material for using it in the Arnold renderer is, let's clean it up over here. So here it is, under materials, and you will find it under materials, Arnold material, the standard surface material. So the standard surface material is the workhorse of the Arnold renderer. You can build all kinds of things with it. It has many, many options. A lot of them we are never going to use. There's only a few others, but the standard surface is the most important material. So I'm going to drag in a standard material, and I'm going to select it and hit Assign to Selection. So now the robot should get the new material. If I hit Render now, I can see suddenly the robot is not shiny metal. It just does not have this shiny metal material anymore, but it has a standard gray material. So let's have a look at the material settings for this standard surface material. I'm going to make my material edit a little bit large, and you can see it's quite a large material. Here's one thing that I miss a little bit. When you you don't have the problem. When you look into the material up here, there is usually a little slot that shows the material. It shows a preview, and right now it just shows the teapot. So in order to show this material, you need to click the button in the bottom left corner of the material editor. It's called Render Materials. So now it renders all the materials, and even if you double click it, it's enlarging the sample ball here, and it shows the material. So you can see right now it has a little reflection on it, but let's have a look at the standard materials, at the parameters. They are here on the right side. So first, we are only going to deal with with three options here. That is the base, that is the base color of the color of my material, or maybe a texture. Then the specular, that is all the what we would call reflections. So things that are either generated by light or by reflecting objects, and the transmission, and that is whatever goes through a material. So we're going to make it transparent. We want to make a material glass-like or somehow transparent, translucent. So we're just going to deal with those three values here. And the first thing, of course, is the base color. And you find out the base color right now is white. It's this here, and when you click it, it opens the color selector, and you can see it's pure white. It's pure white, but when you look at the rendering, you see it's not perfectly white because it only has a value of 80%, 0.8, that it uses the white on the object. So the first thing is when you change the color, let's go for something a little bit more colorful. I'm going to pick a bright orange. The color that you pick here and the color that your robot will get are, the color on the robot is usually a little bit darker because right now we are only 80% using the orange. Let's quickly render it. And you can see that the orange on the robot is a little bit darker than this one. So that is the 80% here. For example, if I switch that to 1, that means it's using the color in 100%, that means you get a slightly more bright orange on your robot. What I'm also going to do is, when I compare two settings in the material, I'm going to clone my render window. So right now it's the first setting with the 80%. I'm going to create a clone window and I'm going to render it again, and the new version will be rendered with 80%, so it will be slightly more orange, more colorful. And now with cloning the window, you can easily compare those two versions before and after. But the 0.8 is one of the standard settings that you're using in the material. So just in case you're wondering, you don't get it as bright colors as you expected, this is because of this here. The next thing is what you can see right here. Right next to the color there is a roughness, and the roughness, and whenever you hold your mouse on one of those values in the Arnold renders, in the Arnold material parameters, you can see an explanation on how it influences the material. So I'm going quickly through the others, and we can adjust some of the settings. The next thing is, you can see that the material right now is slightly reflective, and when I zoom in I can see it is reflective because I get some reflections, some specular from the lights, because we have those 3 light planes on both sides of the robot and on top, and all those shiny things here I get from the specular. So right now the material has what looks like full reflection, because there is no, you cannot go above 1 here, so that is the full reflections here, with a little roughness of 0.2. That means it kind of blurs out the reflection. So see how blurry, glossy the specular reflections are. So if I set this to 0, then it means there is no roughness in it, and it means the reflections will be much sharper. So let's quickly render it and see how that looks like, especially here in the reflections part. Okay, making the reflections more shiny, and if you look at some kind of reflective object, you see it. If it's a glossy surface, you can see that all the reflections of the light, and I don't know if you could see like this, all the reflections of the light are pretty blurry. That actually means that the reflections are getting larger. When I choose glossy reflections, the reflections got a bit smaller. So let's do the same cloning one more time. So I go for the clone rendered window, and I'm going to add a little bit of roughness, a little bit more, than so we can see it even stronger. Let's go for 0.3 in the specular roughness and see how it looks like. Here is the rendered result. Let's compare it to the shiny reflections, and you can see the reflections just got blurred out, but they actually got a little bit larger here. Maybe here on the belly you can see it quite good. So they are blurred out a bit and not as shiny. So the best I think is here on the legs. So the shiny one is a thinner reflection, and this is kind of blurred out around the round surface. Okay, so that is the roughness in the specular reflections. And now the question is, how can I make it even more reflective? So like a really shiny plastic or something like this. First of all, I would use less roughness here to make it really shiny. Let's try 0.2, the standard value here. And we have 2 ways to do this. First, the index of refraction, or IOR. The index of refraction kind of defines the reflective qualities of the material. It works for both for reflection and later on for transmission, so when light goes through. Anyway, light goes through a certain medium, and at the entrance of the medium and at the exit of the medium, the light rays usually get refracted, so the direction of the light kind of gets distorted. The higher the value is, the more distorted it gets. The index of refraction's default value is usually 1, so that means no refraction. In this case, when I set the IOR to 1, you will also see that you get hardly any reflections. So there's no reflections here, just some little bit shiny parts where the most light hits the surface, but no specular reflections. And if, for example, the default value here is, I think usually it's 1.52, and if you go to the Arnold renderer website, there's also a list of index of refractions of common media. So when you check out window glass or I don't know, some kind of paint and some diamond and some metals. But in general, the metals are usually just higher than that. So for example, I'm going to try an IOR of 4, for example. You will see suddenly it's much, and when you go higher than the 1.52, it no longer looks like a reflection on a orange surface, but it kind of turns into a more or less metal look with more when the reflections are even stronger than the color quality. So if you want to create a metal-like surface like we had on our robot in the beginning, there's 2 ways to do it. The first is just give it a high, so we have an orange color here and we give it a high index of refraction. Let's go for 20. Oh, sorry, 20. Let's go for 20 and have a look how it looks like. So usually we shouldn't see much more orange then, maybe just a little bit of orange, but the rest is really very metal-like. Keep in mind that there's no environment here to reflect because it's just a black environment and this white backdrop. So if you have some kind of environment, HDR or background, you would see all that in the reflections. But you can see that the material almost got darker because it's reflecting the black background. So that is one way to create a metal-like surface. The metal-like, if you want to create a metal in here, then usually what you would do is you would create a large index of refraction, but what you would do is you would take the base color and make it black. So if you turn it black, it means it gets no color from the base color here. So it's a kind of a black object. And if you want to get some color, for example, it's a gold or copper kind of metal, then you would go in here and you colorize the specular reflections. So instead of getting the shiny light parts here, make them white, you would go and colorize them in a certain way. For example, if we go for gold, then it would be something like this. This is more copper-like, but there it is, and that looks much more like gold. See, there's a golden reflection on that. It's a very dark gold there. Okay, so that is one way to do it. The next way is to stay at the simple 1.52 standard index of refraction and use a parameter that's called Metalness. And basically Metalness, the surface behave here is 0, and it can go all the way from 0 to 1. So you can turn it into a metal or like half metal, a little bit more. So you get this metal glossy look even though you are not having a larger index of refraction. So let me quickly render it. Oh, sorry. Let's cancel it quickly. Cancel. When you use the metalness factor, in order to get the golden or the color of the reflections, you do not use the specular color, but you use your base color again. So I'm going to just swap those. Oh, sorry, this should be white. So let's get that white. And let's get here our golden orange color. So it's we're using the metalness, you don't need to turn the base color black, you just leave it as any color that you would like to give it. The regular index of refraction, and the metalness is pretty strong. Let's try not that strong, let's try a little bit lower, and here is how it looks like. So that is using the same base color, but it uses the very strong metal look, and that is a fast way to turn something into metal, and you can see it looks really nice. If you want to give it more of a copper look, then you have to put a little bit more red into the gold. So if you make it a little bit more red, and it's more less gold and more shiny copper reflections and so on. If you take out all the color, what you get is a more like polished steel or something. So if I take away all the color and use a white surface, then I would get a chrome kind of metal look for that. Okay, so once again, to create a metal look, you either give it a high index of refraction, for example 20 or 25, but that means you have to make the base color black so that there's no color influence coming from the base color, and you bring the color back into the metal by adjusting the specular color here. When you use the Metalness factor, then you just leave the index of refraction as it is at 1.52, the standard value. Decide which color your metal has with the base color, and adjust the Metalness, how much reflection you need, all the way to 1, which is the most shiny metal. Okay, so that is the basic way to create reflections in our material. Let's do something else. I'm going to get the chrome, the golden look back. So the golden chrome, the golden copper look back. So Metalness 0.8, and the reflections have a little roughness in it, so maybe a little bit less, so that we get even shinier reflections. And here is my golden robot there. Now I would like to create another material, and therefore, and I'm going to use the material, so, and here I am, and I'm going into a top view, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a thin box right between my camera and the robot, just like a window or a piece of glass that you would look through. The box should be really thin, so like a sheet of glass, and we're placing that in front of the window. So let's bring it in here and go back into the camera, and there it is. Let's bring it down and place it so that, let's try, half of the robot is hidden or is in front. So here it is. So half the robot is visible through the glass, and the other one is visible just right next to it. Also, let's try something else. In the top view, I am slightly rotating this piece of glass window, so we get a little bit more complex reflection. So here we are. You know, it's slightly rotated in the window. Now, if I render it now, it will render just a solid box, and therefore we're going to place some glass material onto our box. The box is still selected. I'm hitting M for my material editor and bring in another standard surface material for my glass. And let's have a look what the glass would be like. First of all, what I usually do is when I create a glass, I'm trying to get all the color out of the base color, so I'm going to make my base color black, and it is reflective. It has an index of refraction of 1.5. I'm going to take out the roughness of the specular, so if I get reflections, they are pretty shiny. And what I want to do is I want to get the transmission, and that is how transparent the thing is, and I want it fully transparent, so I'm going to take the transmission to 1, and now I'm going to apply it to my box. And let's have a look how that turns out. So here it is, and if you look through glass outside or any other glass, then you don't see it, you don't see anything of the glass. So when it's really clean, you don't see anything, and that is how it's supposed to be. So there is a glass sheet in front here, but I only see that it's a glass sheet because of two facts. First of all, the edges of the glass are usually dark. In this case, they are dark and they are black. So if I want it slightly bluish or something, I would get some color in here. And the second thing is, when I zoom in, there is some refraction to it. And look at this point here where the arm of the robot looks like it's shifting a little bit. That depends on two things. First of all, the thickness of the glass. If I make my glass a little thicker, so let's do that by making it twice as thick. So now, if I render it again, you can see the shift even more. So there it is. So here's the shift. It depends on how thick the glass is, but usually if you're modeling, you model the glass in its actual thickness, and mine is really thick right now. And the second thing is the index of refraction that is here in the specular influences also the index of refraction that goes through it. So if I take my index of refraction and make it 1 and render it again, you can see the glass is almost invisible because there is no shift here, and also the edges are not reflective anymore, the edges of the glass, and so we don't see those a little bit darker. So if you want to have some decent window glass, you have to give it an index of refraction. When you check it out on the internet, and here is the standard value, I think is 1.52, that is suitable for regular glass. If I render it, it has the shift. And now we're gonna, the refraction. And now to show it a little bit better, I'm also going to, let me cancel that. I'm also going to increase it to something like 3, and then you can see that the shift is getting even more. So there's more refraction here, so the edges will look somehow different, and it shifts even a little bit more. So let's bring that back to a value that is quite natural for glass, the 1.52. And the next thing is, here in the transmission, there's also a roughness, and here's no roughness in this one, but the roughness of the specular is also influencing the roughness of the glass. So if I change the roughness, let's say to 0.3 and render my picture again, you'll notice that suddenly it looks like transparent. It looks like a glass that has a diffuse transparency. So when you look through, it looks like milk glass. So 0.3 is a little much. 0.1, that looks a little bit more like glass would look. And when you see here, you can see that they are not glossy transparency anymore, but it's a diffuse transparency. Of course, you need in order to see a little bit behind, you need a very low roughness value there. So it kind of the roughness kind of simulates a rough surface, and this is also what the glass does. A glass usually gets when you look through it and you see it diffuse and not glossy, then it usually has a rough surface, sandblasted surface or something glued onto it. So that is that's why the roughness works for both the reflection of the specular and the transmission there. So let's bring it back to a regular shiny glass, and now I would like to show you another fact that you have to take in account. Right now we have one sheet of glass here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into the model. Close it, also close the material editor right now. Here's my sheet of glass, and I'm going to make a copy of the sheet and look into the top view, and I'm trying to do 3 sheets of glass so that you're not looking through one sheet of glass, but 3 sheets of glass. So here it is, 1, 2, 3. Because in Arnold, and you might have seen it here in the render settings, when you check out Arnold, the transmission quality, so we checked out, it was pretty grainy and noisy what we saw through the glass. The quality of the transmission, what you see through glass, is defined by the transmission samples. And so while the normal camera samples are at 3, and we usually make that higher, so if we have glass there and we look through the glass and there's also something behind the glass that we want to see in good quality, we have to increase the transmission settings as well. Here's one other thing. The transmission ray depth right now is 2. So that means if I render the camera right now, something weird happens. The 2 other sheets of glass suddenly are black. Why? Because in order to get through one solid sheet of glass, you need to have 2 transmissions. You first go into the glass and then you get out of the glass. So that is 2 transmissions, 2 rays, 2 times per 1 sheet of glass. So when I have 3 sheets of glass here, actually what I need is I need to increase the transmission ray depth. So when I go from 2 to 4, that means the second sheet of glass will still work and you can see through it. Render it quickly. Here is the second sheet of glass now visible. And of course, if I turn this to 6, then I have at least 3 sheets of glass. So keep in mind, especially for example, when you have sliding doors. The sliding doors, when they are closed, they are usually right next to each other, but when you slide them open, suddenly you have 2 sheets of glass. So you need a minimum of 4 rays, or a ray depth of 4 to get through those 2 sheets. And when there's some other window in the background, then you get another 2 or 4 rays there. So make sure you increase that. The thing is, when you say, okay, I have now 6 sheets of glass, I would need a ray depth here of 12. Then you find out that still 1 sheet of glass will not be transparent. Why? Because there is also a total ray limit. So that means you can put in whatever number you want here, it still will only go for 10 rays. So if you have more than 5 sheets of glass, 10 rays to go through, you make sure that you also increase the total ray limits here to 16 or whatever how many you need. Okay, so that is for the pieces of glass. Let's delete 2 of those glass sheets again, because I want to show you one more thing, and that is my first, so I can go back to ray depth of 2 here. In the material editor, there's one more thing that I would like to show you in the transmission section, and that is the color of the transmission. That means whatever color do the things get tinted when you look through. And when you take, for example, pink sunglasses, that means you look through them and whatever you see gets tinted into pink or whatever your glasses look like. So there's 2 values here. Usually glass either colorizes the reflections, and that would be this color here. So if you look at a building, for example, and the building has a greenish look and all these glass facades, then you would usually change the specular color here, because you want all the reflections to be slightly tinted green. If you look through glass and everything behind the glass will get a different color, then it's the color in the transmission. So you have to bring in some color there. But for example, if I wanted a greenish look, make sure you don't go for a dark green here, because you don't want to darken all the things that you look through, but give it a light green, so it's more like a very light green here in the transmission. Let's quickly render it. And here it is, of course. Now it looks like green glass. But keep in mind, that is only green because we look through it and we can see the background, which is white, and now it suddenly turns green. If you want green reflections on it, and let's also do that, bring that back to white. And how can I show you that the reflections are green? Pretty simple. I can take my sheet of glass, and I'm going to do a copy, and I bring a copy in the back behind the robot. So now here's a second sheet of glass here, and when you render it, here is, not very strong, a slight reflection of the golden robot in the glass. You can see there's a little bit of a reflection in the sheet, and now, so I thought my Max crashed. Oh, it crashed the material editor. the reflection is still white, so it's not colorized in any kind. So let's take this and make it slight blue. Here's a light blue. So I'm tinting my specular reflections of the glass, and now I should get a, I'm not sure if I can see that well because it's not really that strong reflection. If you colorize it into a certain color, it does kind of the opposite. It kind of takes the complementary color and uses that. So for example, if I change this color here to a bright red, what color would I get? A green. So that is the complementary. It's not the exact complementary color, but it is somewhere, I guess, on the color wheel on the opposite side. So that would be between green and blue here in the middle. Okay. Don't ask me why. I'm sure if you look into the Arnold material, it kind of gives you an answer why this. It has to do something with physics of colors and blah blah. I don't know exactly, but this is the way that you would colorize your reflections. Okay, let's bring that back to 0. We already spent some time on the materials. Let's do a few more things. The first thing is this the only material that you can use in the Arnold render? No, it's not. And you will see when you import something into Max from Revit or from some other program, you see that the materials that are assigned are not the standard Arnold surfaces, the standard surface Arnold material, but what they use is what's called the physical material. What is called physics material? Physical material. I'll show you where it is. Materials, general physical material. And I prefer, in many ways, I prefer the physical material because it has a few funny things. Let's bring in one of those physical materials. First of all, it has less parameters here. But it has the same thing. It has the base color. It has the same way to treat the reflections with the index of refraction. They call it not transmission, but they call it transparency, but it is the same thing. Here is a transparency. When you increase it, then it's getting transparent and so on. It's using the same index of refraction here and so on and so on. Let's bring that to 0. But the funny thing is, and let's apply the whole robot. I'm going to give the whole robot the new material. So I'm selecting the robot and give it the new physics material. What's quite funny is that the physical material has some presets. So when you start to create a material and you say you want to have it look, I want a metal look, for example, you don't have to start from the very beginning. You don't have to think of all the material parameters that contribute to a metal look. You can pick a preset and then just work with it, change the materials and so on. So if you start with with a simple one, a glossy paint, a satin or matte paint, or even a metal, what I mentioned before. So here are the different metals. You can start with a copper material, and then all the settings are adjusted to a copper material. So if I render it now, my robot will be a dark copper material. And if you're not satisfied with the look of the copper, you can always go in there and adjust some of the settings there, more reflections, less reflections, and so on. So that is the good thing, that you start with one of the presets. And even the glass that we have in our 2 glass sheets here, so let me quickly select my 2 glass objects and get another physical material here, this one. And assign it to the glass. Here's also a glass preset. Here's a glass for thin geometry. That means there is no refraction upon entering or exiting the glass. So this shift in the lag that we had is not visible when we choose thin geometry. That's helpful when you model something and all the windows are not actual solid geometry, but they are only one face. Then you use the thin geometry. The solid geometry in my case, of course, is better because I have solid glass here. So I'm going to use the preset for the solid geometry. I already assigned it, and if I render it, here is my glass surface. So it pretty much looks the same as the Arnold glass before that we created. It has the refraction, so it has this shift in here because it's so thick. It has some reflection in it, and so on and so on. So you can always go in here and adjust all the settings for the physical material. Some of those physical materials, and let me get another one for the robot, or take the robot one and just change the preset. Some of them, and I'm gonna use a, where is it? Ketchup, that would be funny. Let's go for a, where's the concrete? Here, polish. Let's do rough concrete. If you choose rough concrete, for example, it creates a material that also has some maps that go into it because it's rough concrete, so it needs actually a picture that kind of creates the rough surface. It will not look nice because as soon as it uses a picture, you need perfect UVW coordinates, and the robot, and I checked it before, doesn't have those, so it will render, it will maybe look like rough concrete, but it will not be really perfect in all the areas. Especially here in this area, you can see that there are some messed up UVW coordinates. So here you can see it. You can see it, of course, best that it's not properly UVW mapped when you place a picture on it. For example, this picture here, it's a simple noisy black and white image, and if I bring this into the base color and render it, you can see that it has correct UVW map coordinates, but you can see those streaks here, so it kind of pulls it in one direction, and that doesn't look so good. So especially here in the armpit or in the shoulder, it doesn't look too good. So that is, of course, how you use a material. So, but the other tutorial where we used textures on our material, that is the same thing. Here is a texture as your base color. So instead of having a base color, you can use any map here. Of course, you can use bump maps, you can use displacement maps, you can use transparency maps, and so on and so on. So in many ways, the physical material, I usually prefer it because it has less parameters. It has a simpler structure here of, see, transparency, is it glossy or is it rough? And when it's rough, then it's a different value for roughness and so on. So it's kind of nice. Also, it has the possibility to adjust the reflections with a curve. With a curve, basically, you can adjust how strong the reflections are. So are the reflections, usually the reflections are stronger towards the edges because this is where you look at the object. You can check it with your cell phone. Pretty simple. When you look straight at it, the reflection is not that strong, but when you tilt it and you have you have an angle that you look at it, you have much stronger reflection. Usually it's done by the IOR in Arnold Materials, but here you can also have your custom curve. And that is nice when you have some curved surfaces, like a curved building facade, and you want more reflections on the curvy side than on the front side, and you can just adjust it. So this means this is the reflection on when you look straight at it, and the more the higher the angle gets that you look at it, the more reflection you get, and that is the curve that you can adjust with all those values. So that would be the physical material with all its presets. I really enjoy those. And the last thing that I would like to show you is how you can use a material library, because when you go into your material editor, there are no material libraries here. So let's get a material library, and there's also one on the Arnold website that you can download. Here it says material library. Let's see what kind of materials they give you. So here are some brushed metal things. All those materials do not use any texture, so those are materials just with the physical properties. For example, all those subsurface scattering materials like milk or jade or even some car paint and so on. You can download them here. The material library is available here. So let's see what I get. Download. And it is a zip file. Let me quickly unzip it. And what you get is a matte file. So it's a material library that is a matte file. Here in your material editor, in order to get the material into your material editor, there's one you can drag and drop, but as you probably noticed, I'm not a big fan of drag and dropping. When you do a right click here, and I cleaned up closed all the tabs here. I do a right click, and here is Open Material Library. I can open it, and let's quickly browse for it. Here is my Max to Arnold Material Library, and suddenly I have the Max to Arnold Material Library in here. So if I open it, here are all the materials that they give you. If you need one, you just take out the jade. I want to check out the jade material. So it has a green, it has also transmission, it also has some subsurface scattering parameters, and I'm going to put the jade material onto my robot, and let's quickly see how that looks like. Probably it renders really slow, but let's see how it does. Let me get rid of the glass sheet, at least the one in the front. Here it is, my jade material on the robot. So that is a so-called subsurface scattering material. So there's different things going on different levels. So there's some reflections are on the outer levels, some colors are a little bit deeper, and so that gives you this a little bit translucent effect. So especially when you place a light in the back. That was the material library, how you get it into your material editor. So that I'm sure you find other material libraries for Arnold Materials, and there's also other Autodesk material libraries that you can find out there. But keep in mind, when you have a lot of material libraries here, and you can also create your own material libraries, of course. When you have a lot of material libraries, this button here will take some time. So because when I click on the Max to A, you can see all those tiny little samples, they have to be rendered. And this is what this rendering button does. So when you have like thousands of materials here and you start your material editor for the first time, you might wait a minute or so. So that's why I usually have this. I'm a little impatient here, so I had this turned off. So it's not loading all those materials. Right now we still have them. So here it still shows me the jade there, but I'm sure if I adjust something, adjust something, okay. No, it still does. Yeah, but it's not updating it. So it's not rendering. Only when this one's on, it's updating the material. Okay, that's it for today. I hope you liked it. There was a brief introduction to the Arnold material. Please don't forget to hit the like button for the video if that was something for you. And I also promised you a little bonus video. The bonus video will not be available without the link. Here's the only link, so it's a kind of secret video. Check out the video. It is a feature that has been added to 3ds Max in the latest update, and you probably don't have it, but I'm going to show you how to get it and show you what it does. So here's the secret link. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.